The wars in the Warp are a brutal, bloody affair, or at least they will be when the Gore DLC releases. But surrounding all that carnage and mayhem, there's a strange beauty in the Sea of Souls, and it makes for some cinematic experiences. The Lords of Change are on the prowl, flying on arcane winds from their eyries in the clouds, and they have a Khorne warband to deal with in a battle of bitter rivals. Might versus Magic, Tzeentch versus Khorne, Indie Pride versus Aerocrastic. We got our hands full today, boys. The protagonist of this story, one Mr. Milk and Cookies, is playing as Tzeentch, the educated and enlightened Chaos God, and my general is an Exalted Lord of Change of the Lore of Metal, rocking 2 spells here, Searing Doom and Final Transmutation, which can be incredibly good against melee-only factions. Very hard to avoid blobbing when you only have melee troops, and it's especially good here, because although Khornate demons have innate magic resist, the mortal side of the roster does not, and is typically better represented against Tzeentch. Talk more about why in a moment. Portal Glyph is an absurdly good summon, Furies are a fantastic value proposition, and so is the Lord of Change as a whole. Very good Lord across the board. Now, one thing you'll notice as we move through my army is that a lot of units are very good on the Tzeentch roster, and Spawn of Tzeentch are no exception. Their Armor Sundering pairs quite well with Forsaken, and that is the bread and butter of how they win many engagements in close quarters. Lower the enemy armor, then the Forsaken's lack of AP isn't such a big deal. Forsaken of Tzeentch are quite useful themselves, essentially immune to spell damage, and we've got 3 of them here, alongside 4 Blue Horrors, 2 Screamers, and 2 Chaos Furies. Furies can deal with the low armor targets and Tar Pit, while Screamers can rear charge the heavily armored large enemies, like Crushers or Bloodthirsters, and they can put in quite a lot of work for the value they bring to the table as well. There's a Soul Grinder too, and on the other side of the battlefield come the armies of the evil Arrow Crabsticks and his hateful, ignorant, and despicable warband of Khorne. And though they are led by a demonic herald, it's still a largely mortal-themed army. 4 Chaos Warriors with shields, supported by the Blood Shrine Chariot, designed to support the front line with the Totem of Endless Bloodletting, and Gore Feast, to help sustain it in the melee grind. It's not considered a particularly high-tier unit, but it can do its job, and it's a fun, fluffy, thematic centerpiece. But yeah, a lot of shielded mortals, including 2 Skullcrushers, which are a major threat here, with their 130 armor and bronze shields, and of course their speed as well. And those shields are a big reason why mortals are favored here as a frontline over demons, because they simply won't get torn up by missile fire on the way in. And perhaps more importantly, Forsaken will struggle to pierce their armor in a 1v1 fight. So having Chaos Warriors make up the bulk of your force is a very smart play. To get things kicked off, Soul Grinder is spewing Thunderbolts at the Blood Shrine and now at the Skullcrushers, and both it and the Juggernauts will be a viable target for it to snipe out. As always, the biggest downfall of the unit is its tiny ammo pool. Only 10 shots means it's rarely going to take a unit out of the game all by itself, but it can still be effective at putting pressure on high-value cav or single entities, as it is demonstrating here. Red Rover, the Chaos Rhino, regretting its life decisions before it's oh so cruelly plucked from this world. 2 Furies and 4 Fleshhounds of Khorne will make up the rest of the Khornate build, so a highly mobile force designed to close into melee quickly and overwhelm the back line. Searing Doom clipping the Khorne Warriors with a nice shot right in the center of their formation, ripping the heart out of it. Only killed a couple models though. Decent damage. Searing Doom's a really good spell here. Again, Khorne kind of has to blob, especially around the single entities if they want to kill them. So to do so, they will have to present some juicy targets for the Final Transmutation and Searing Dooms. Now, funnily enough, Skullcrushers do not have spell resistance, which may be a holdover from the tabletop, I can't quite remember, but it's a bit strange because lore-wise, I believe it's quite common for Juggernauts to come equipped with collars, much like the ones Fleshhounds wear. And as per usual, Fleshhounds are first into the breach, followed up by a charge from the Blood Shrine, striking from a great angle and preventing much fire from the front ranks. Portal Glyph summon from the Lord of Change in response, vomiting Furies into the fray, as Screamers and more Furies descend into the madness unfolding on the Tzeentch left flank. Full surround off on that first Vanguard wing. Skullcrushers following up with a charge, and that's going to get ugly for the Blue Horrors out on that side. Over here, the Khornate Furies going after the Screamers of Tzeentch, and wisely they will decide to disengage. They do not perform well against Furies. You do not want to waste them against Furies. You want them to rear charge the high value large targets and use that armor piercing, which is entirely wasted against the low armor of the Chaos Furies, and they're getting melted by blue horror fire from below, and the Lord of Change coming over to help out in melee combat. Some of the Furies are already melting. They're fighting Fleshhounds, no surprise there. Here come the Skullcrushers, supported by that Blood Shrine. They will have +5 melee attack and +4 leadership from that totem of endless bloodletting. And here, in the shadow of Dark Gods, they will be ripping and tearing until it is done. But they only have 100 armor now, because of that armor sundering from the spawn of Tzeentch, and there's a lot of local superiority for Tzeentch out on that side, so I think Khorne will probably want to retreat. Blue Horrors in guard mode, firing at the Chaos Warriors moving to the center, and the Blood Shrine, it's trying to tie down everything, and it can do so. It has the mass to push through these infantry blocks, no problem at all. I love the cyclonic spinning animations as it decides to charge in. Always having the time of its life when it makes it into melee combat. Gorfy's giving it a little bit of regen, tying down the Blue Horrors in the back, while the Soul Grinder continues to plunk away at these Skullcrushers out on the flank and killing 1 or 2 models per shot, so certainly not bad value being generated there, but the projectile doesn't penetrate multiple models particularly easily, so only 10 shots is a mitigating factor, while the Screamers of Tzeentch are probably going to be thinking about taking out that Blood Shrine when it's isolated, unsupported, all alone. Forsaken and Chaos Spawn retreated from the front line. They want their barrier shield to go back up. They haven't lost any HP at all, so it can go all the way back up to 800, and that's one effective way to get a massive increase in your effective HP pool. Before you've taken any model losses whatsoever, retreat and get your shield back. Barrier is a really strong passive, one of the best army abilities in the entirety of the Warhammer trilogy. Soul Grinder's got maybe 1 or 2 shots left, but yeah, killing a lot of Skullcrushers over there. They're down to about half HP. Blood Shrine running away, as it should. Chaos Spawn, they wanted their shield back, but not sure they should have gone all the way back there to try to kill it. Screamers can probably deal with that all by itself. Final Transmutation with Horn of Khorne down on the Tzeentch right flank, and those Skullcrushers felt a little bit there, but not massive damage. It wasn't an overcast. Decent value, but nothing completely crazy. Portal Glyph spawning more Chaos Furies, and the Fleshhounds will disengage. A very smart play from Aerocrastic there to make sure you can't get rear charged, tied down, and pinned in with this Lord of Change, which is a force in melee. It's not Kairos Fateweaver. He can kill stuff in CQB. This is going to be a nasty Searing Doom. Oh, straight from the heavens, obliterating that Khorne Chaos Warrior unit, and that's a super high value spell. Very easy to spam, not so easy to dodge when a ton of stuff is happening on the battlefield at once, and those Khorne Warriors will be feeling that one in the morning. They lost about 15 or 20 models and a ton of HP from that cast, so very nicely positioned there. Bounce Bar is still dead even about 4 minutes in. Skullcrushers are still a major threat, and there are a ton of Fleshhounds, so defending the back line, well, there isn't really going to be much of a back line at this point. Blood Shrine has melted, but it did its job. Wasn't really supporting the frontline engagements at all, but honestly, the Chaos Warriors don't need help. Skullcrushers are more than enough support there. So it basically just plunged to the center and tried to tie down the Blue Horrors, which Arrow's done a good job of doing so far. I mean, the Blue Horrors really have not fired much. Most of them were at 2/3 or half ammunition when they died. So they left a lot of their potential DPS on the table, all due to some good Skullcrusher and Fleshhound play. Searing Doom dropping in from above, clipping the Chaos Rhinos. Don't believe it killed any models there, though, and the Fleshhounds are ready to charge in. They have a full surround off on the Soul Grinder of Tzeentch, and might be time for an Arcane Storm, the tier 3 army ability for Tzeentch. If Khorne doesn't move, they're going to take a whole lot of fire from the heavens, but they will. They'll notice it. It's a relatively easy spell to dodge, and in fact, the spawn of Tzeentch, pinned down by some of the remnants of those Fleshhounds, unable to get out of the way, and they took more damage than anything else there. So, not the greatest tier 3 army ability cast in this particular instance. Definitely dodged from the coordinate forces, and I have to say, that looked like it was just as planned. Some friendly fire, very Skaven-esque. Tzeentch is a bit conspiratorial. I'm sure those spawn offended the Changer of Ways in some past life, and that was his vengeance. But yeah, what was trying to happen there was that the Screamers would pin these Skullcrushers in place. They positioned a little bit too late and weren't able to pin them down in time to keep them within the radius of that bombardment, which is unfortunate, but it looks like those Skullcrushers are probably going to tear around anyway, and indeed they do. So even though Khorne's army wasn't melted in that bombardment, still got some good engagements on the Tzeentch side, and a lot of the Khorne army is beginning to rot. Now, there's a lot more red on the field than there is blue, but the balance of power is still dead even, and that's for one very simple reason. The Lord of Change is a force, and he has a lot of winds of magic left, a lot more terror potential, and he's good in melee, and there's not a lot of bonus versus large on the field. So getting through his barrier and all that HP while he's doing stuff like this might prove problematic for the Warriors of the Blood God. That's a big final transmutation. That was a ton of value. He's up to 1,800 value now, 100 kills or so, and he's still supported by that Soul Grinder of Tzeentch, which of course is out of ammunition at this point, but is not a unit you can afford to ignore in CQB. And it's got the Baleful Flamer breath attack from close range, clearing out a bunch of Khorne infantry, and those single entities are pretty much on an island. There are a few Forsaken out on the flanks, but it'll mostly be up to the final transmutations, Searing Dooms, and the Lord of Change, while the Soul Grinder of Tzeentch just tries to run around, get its barrier shield back, and force some blobbing. More terror routing for the Skullcrushers, and the Fleshhounds are about to start crumbling out, and the balance of power is now in favor of Tzeentch. But there's a lot of troops for them to deal with, and they would really like some Chaos Knight charges or something to help support them here. There just aren't bodies to absorb the damage, so it's up to their barrier shields, which have mostly been dealt with at this point, and their melee capabilities, and whatever winds of magic or army abilities they have remaining. And there's still some relatively healthy Skullcrushers in there, although that that Searing Doom might have something to say about that. I think it's majority or 100% armor-piercing damage. So yeah, even if you have 130 armor, it'll hurt if that thing lands on you. And we saw their HP bar drop there, up to 140 kills and 2,300 damage value on the Lord of Change. Now, the Soul Grinder is about to crumble out, Forsaken being run down by the Fleshhound, Skullcrushers routing in the background, and another Arcane Surge from above. And this one was glorious. Nothing to pin them down in place, but still sometimes difficult to get out of the way. And we just saw a lot of demons crumble out there. Fleshhounds, they can kind of absorb it with their 50% magic resist from their Callers of Khorne, but they went in to re-pin down the Lord of Change. Nice play from Arrow to think about that, to realize that they can probably tank that damage, but nothing else in the army can, because nothing else has magic resist besides the Herald himself. But they have their full surround off one more time, and if there's no more final transmutations, it might be over for Tzeentch, beginning to look bleak, even though the balance power says they have a chance. He could cause a chain rout here. He's actually landed 4 attacks in a row on the Herald of Khorne, who's dropped down to 1,200 HP. So he's maybe 2 or 3 hits from crumbling out completely, and that could cause a chain rout against this terror from the void. But there's a lot of troops, and they've got 44 melee attack. Khorne Chaos Warriors have great stats base, and they're going to get even better when they get the Horn of Khorne for another plus 24. And that's going to be too much for the Lord of Change. Not a whole lot left in that Khorne warband, but enough to bring down the beast, and Arrowcrastic will take the battle. Well played to him. That was a fun one. And it was a cinematic one, too. I mean, some really cool shots in that battle, if I do say so myself. The backgrounds of some of those warp maps are truly incredible to behold, and a fitting locale for a battle of that nature. Exalted Lord of Change was a monster, 150 kills, 3,000 damage value. Forsaken did not trade well into the Chaos Warriors. That's, again, why you like to see the Khorne Warrior front line when you're playing as the Blood God against Tzeentch. Skullcrushers and Chaos Warriors are a nice core. They can work real well when they're supported by Fleshhounds charging in from the flanks to shut down all that range play from the Blue Horrors. Soul Grinder had a pretty decent game, 1,400 damage value on him, but it'd be better if that projectile could actually go through multiple models, and unfortunately it does not. So limited value when you can only fire 10 shots into Skullcrushers. There wasn't really anything like super expensive to bring, and that's typically what most, like very few factions want to bring expensive single entities against Tzeentch. It's just super dangerous. Screamers, Furies, Blue Horrors, None of them performed incredibly well, although a few of them got some good charges into the Skullcrushers and supporting on the flanks. But yeah, I mean, this Khorne army was designed to break down range play and get through Forsaken, and it was very well designed from top to bottom and very well microed as well. Good engagements across the board and a nicely thought out build from Aerocrastic. GG to him, and a fun one between the Changer of Ways and the Blood God himself. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. Any Pride, signing out for now.